Rosete. Karate. Rosete is by. Karate. Posekete. Karos. All right. April's not here, but she kind of is, but kind of isn't. It's a guest that we've had on before who probably needs no introduction. If you've been a fan of our channel for years, have we been on for years yet?
Yeah, maybe.
It's been years.
It's been a couple years.
Yeah.
3 years.
So 3 years.
Wow.
3 years of
Okay.
fame. I can't. Yeah. The paparazzi are out my window.
All the
now.
fame and fortune it's brought.
That's right. I'm Pastor Drake. I'm one of the pastors at Trinity Reformed Church in Las Vegas with the guy right now. How this is set up above me. I got 3 kids, big fish tank, a brand new library that I just live in now. It's almost the master bedroom at this point. It looks really good. I don't have a board and easel yet, but I got my chair that I brought my whiteboard on to look very academic. Because I like to LARP academia. But yeah, that's who I am. Brian, who are you?
I'm Brian Hodge. I'm a pastor at Trinity Reformed Church of Las Vegas, along with Drake, and I also have a fish tank. So, in that regard, we're actually better than David in many ways, because David only he'll get a fish tank eventually, but right now he can't. So,
would Cambridge allow you to have a fish tank?
No way.
No. I mean, it depends on which college I'm at and how much I want to get in trouble. I mean,
Byron, part of like the liberal arts
Trinity College. So
he's got to be like postmodern arts or something, and then they'll let him have whatever he wants.
There you go.
Maybe, yeah. All right. Well, I'm David.
All right, David, who are you?
I'm not a pastor. I'm, I guess, now an academic. I'll be starting my PhD at Cambridge in the fall. I just finished my master's, working on translation theory from Hebrew Bible into English, looking at the role of style and Robert Alter's translation. So that was actually a lot of fun, really, really fascinating, the kinds of depth you can reach when you actually start paying attention to narrative construction and poetic construction in the Bible, as opposed to trying to read it like a textbook, which it is not. More than 60% of it is actually poetry. Go figure. And we'll actually get into a little bit of that today too. Like you don't read it like you read a textbook. But yeah, so that's me. I'll work on my PhD coming in the fall, working on the poetics of creation. So looking at creation accounts and how poetics and literary style affect the way that we think about the creation, not just in Genesis, but also in Job, 38 through 42, the Theophany, Proverbs 8 with wisdom alongside God at the creation, as well as some of the Psalms. So
yeah,
that's the plan for now.
Okay, so we're gonna watch a video from Eschatology Matters. This guy talking about the topic is Satan does Satan still have authority right now, as Christ is sitting at the right hand of the Father and reigning in some capacity? Is there any, if at all, authority that Satan has right now, or is he bound? And this guy's going to give his view that Satan is bound and that Satan has zero authority. And he's going to give arguments for that. We're going to interact with that.
Well, he's going to talk about how he got there, right? So, which is helpful.
Sure, yeah.
It's kind of helpful to know, because there's some critiques there, I think. But
yeah, so Brian, you're in control. We're going to go to, it's like a 17-minute video, but we'll try to get like the big points and then address those.
Of life in this fallen world began to slowly change over 6 years ago as I began to grow more optimistic for a variety of reasons. My optimism was theologically confirmed in August of 2022 when, much to my surprise, I embraced post-millennialism, listening to a sermon by James White called My Journey of Hope to the Future. We'll put a link in the show notes. Something I previously rejected as a joke, unworthy of consideration. Since then, my understanding of redemptive history has completely changed from a primary focus on the life to come to a focus on both this life and the one to come. I realized victory and transformation wasn't just for our personal lives in the church, but for the entire world and the nations within it, in what we've come to call the Great Commission. Jesus'
Real
command
quick.
to his disciples in Matthew 20.
Does he say what he was before?
So I don't know, but the way he describes it sounds very Gnostic. And it's fascinating to me to where that's the type of person you would convert because they have bad theology already. Like the idea, like he even mentions like how the world, I thought the world was not our home. We're just a passing through. It's like, yeah, that's Gnostic. You didn't hold a Christian position of eschatology before. So it's not surprising that you are making these mistakes now on the flip side. Because you didn't have a good theology. So all this stuff about like, well, I listened to a sermon by James White, and I think Drake, you probably listened to that. I've listened to it. And James White kind of he makes a mistake about the already not yet that we'll talk about a little bit later or whatever. But again, if you make that mistake with the already not yet that James is making, and then this guy listens to that and he's like, oh, listen to what he said. I was already becoming more optimistic. And then that was confirmed theologically by this sermon. And I'm like, okay, this is a great example of how you do eisegesis.
Yeah.
You get your ideas first, and then you kind of start seeing them in the text because things kind of resonate. Oh, that sounds like what I already believe. And you kind of connect. You're like, look, I have support for what I believe. Rather than going to text. If he had said, you know what, I was this way before, but then I was studying these texts and exegeting them in context, and then I came up with this, it's going to be very clear the verses as he goes through them that he didn't exegete any of this, and he's misinterpreting it because he's ignoring the context, or he's ignoring the grammar, or something of that nature, or he's just not understanding how to read literature. But this is the perfect example to where you get people then who are like, no, this is true. And then someone else comes along and says, no, this is true. And they're not doing exegesis. They're doing, even if they're doing what I would say is academic study of the Bible, which is a larger circle, exegesis is a smaller circle within that. So every exegete is doing academic study. Not everyone doing academic study of the Bible is an exegete. And it's problematic because if I were to like take out the books in the world that were academic study but not exegesis, most books would disappear about the Bible. Most of them. Most scholarly books would disappear because they're not exegetical in nature. They're not paying attention to the rules of language that the author is assuming that you're going to assume when you interpret him. So that, and it's the same thing that we do. We're assuming when we speak, someone's going to take us in context and understand what we're saying, and not come up with ideas ahead of time of what they already believe we're going to say, and then try to fit everything we say into it. Then you're never going to understand us that way. Communication is impossible. So, it's very clear that his journey is eisegetical in nature. That's the problem. And it's going to run into, we're going to mention a lot of texts today to where, how do you deal with these texts in what you just said? If what your belief that Satan's not ruling is true, how is this happening? So.
One, if I can add something here. Up until this point, everything he said is largely true. Yes.
Right.
The promises of God are for now and the world to come.
And it takes over the whole world, all that, yeah.
Yeah, this is true. It's not a he hasn't said anything yet that's like crazy. He's going to go in a new direction, but like where he's at right now is the anti-Gnostic or the right Christian perspective that recognizes that this is not spiritual versus material. It is innately and engaged in the physical, the material, the spiritual, all together. So he's recognizing that. So that's good. We should give him credit for that.
Yeah, 100%.
Now he's going to go in a slightly different direction.
It's the non sequitur.
Yeah,
it's the non sequitur. This is something all post mills they make this non sequitur because it's salvation ultimately will be physical. It will include the entire world. Christ will take over the nations. Therefore, that's going to happen in some millennial kingdom, and that'll be, and since we believe the millennial kingdom is happening on our side of things, Christ has to take over everything on our side. Now, part of that is reading texts like Isaiah 66 and thinking, oh, well, new heavens, new earth takes place while people are dying. And therefore, oh, that must be where the millennium is, when people are dying. And therefore Christ must take over the nations, on this side of things. So it's just a series of exegetical fallacies and non sequiturs that are put together. But the theology itself, what he just said right there, we could leave that and be like, yeah, we all agree. No, that's not where the dispute is. we all agree.
There's one thing he says, and people use this, I guess, idiomatically when he said, well, I used to believe we were in the wilderness just passing through.
Yeah.
And I hate when people use that, because if you read Hebrews, the first 5 chapters are about Israel passing through, right? And and how to behave in the wilderness, not because you're not in it, but because you are. Like, because you are actually sojourning now, what you do now matters like it mattered then. So
yeah.
So when you use that language, like, oh, we're not passed through the wilderness, I always want to be like, well, what do you do with Hebrews, the first 5 chapters?
Yeah.
Is it just is it just pointing back, saying like, see, just you got to be extra careful because of those guys actually that were passing through the wilderness. But today, it doesn't matter for you because you're not passing through it, I guess.
Well, yeah, and if you look at even the narrative in the Pentateuch, right? So they pass through, waters are split, just like in the creation event. So waters are split. So that's a signal. It's not just, hey, look what I can do every day. I'm going to split these waters. And it's God signaling, I'm going to create you. This is creation now. I'm giving you the story of the world. There's creation. You've got through the initial creation part. Then there's wilderness. That's life now. That's the world now. You're going to have to go through here, and I'm going to be creating you. I'm going to be teaching you the lesson that I'm trying to teach humanity, that you need to rely on me and not everything else and not on yourselves. It's me. I'm life. You got to get that. They don't obviously get that in the wilderness, but that's what they're supposed to get. And then once you get that lesson, you go into the promised land of milk and honey, and your enemies will never harm you, and everything will be great. And that's new heavens and new earth in the Bible. That's really what that represents. So you would say in this sense that we are just passing through this world in the sense of the fallenness of it, the imperfection of it. But it's not like we're not going into like a different world, like God's going to destroy this one and make something new. We're not going to like just heaven and living in heaven forever. Like, it's this world transformed. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that later, because with the already not yet. But in a sense, it is true that we are just passing through this fallen world in order to get to its final creation or whatever. The non sequitur is, you would have to then conclude we're not really in the wilderness then, or we won't be once we enter the millennium. Once you're in the millennium, you're in Israel, you're in the promised land, and it's this mistake, I think, this confusion of, it seems that the terminus when God's talking about these things is new heavens and new earth, not the millennium. The millennium, it's possible that that's a thing that happens. The Revelation gives that as one of the possibilities of the end time scenario. I don't think John knows how it's going to end, so he gives multiple scenarios. But that's one possibility, that Christ is going to have like a little piece of new heavens, new earth. But even there, as it's described, it's a piece cut out of the world, and the rest of the world is still fallen and wicked. It's not a transformation of the world. The whole world's not transformed, and Christ isn't ruling over all the nations in a transformed way that's been transformed by the gospel and everything until new heavens and new earth. That does not happen until that point. Romans 8 is all the creation is waiting for the sons of God to be revealed. And what's that revelation of the sons of God? The resurrection of the body. So at that point, everything's transformed. Before that point, you don't have it. And so it's a confusion. Again, it's this misunderstanding of the already not yet, as though the already not yet means we get some spiritual stuff and physical stuff now, and then we get some spiritual stuff and physical stuff then. Instead of the New Testament idea, which is you get everything spiritual now, every spiritual blessing, all of the incorruption of God. You are deified in your spirit now, so that you have all access, you partake of the divine nature, everything you need for life and godliness now, and physically in the resurrection. then you get all that physical stuff. Post-mill wants to be like, oh, I have a more of a optimistic view of the world to where everything's getting better. And like I used to talk to post-mills all the time where they'd be like, yeah, I think that, we seem to be living longer, which I think is an illusion, but we seem to be living longer than other people, and things seem to be getting better. And I think, maybe the animals will even treat each other better. It's like, really? I don't think so. But that idea of like, I think that you're misunderstanding something about the kingdom of God. That when Jesus says he makes, well, I'll go on and on about what he says, and we need to.
Well, real quick, like Midbada is a big deal, right? Old and new. The wilderness is a big deal, and my biggest gripe with what he's suggesting too, with this idea of, because he's going to say he's going to wrap everything's written prior to 70 AD, right? 70 AD is kind of like the exiting the wilderness event.
Post-mills need that, yeah.
They need it, right? So my question is always, when does the New Testament become irrelevant to you?
Yeah.
At what point is it no longer needed? At what point is First Peter, a museum piece rather than something that's living and active and actually, still encourage you to look forward to what the good is and what is coming and what you are looking forward to? Because if I'm not there, and if things are progressing, I don't know if this guy's a golden ager or not, it makes the New Testament irrelevant at some point.
Yeah. Well, most things are attached. It's not just statements about Satan ruling. Most things are attached to then instructing Christians on how to live in light of that, which I guess you can just ignore now because that's not true.
I think one of the other things that's interesting is, even if I take put on a post-mill hat for a moment and take, okay, but Yeshua has come, Jesus has come. Now we're in Joshua. We're not in the Pentateuch.
Yeah.
Now we're in Joshua. Yeah. It's like, guess what? The Canaanites are still in charge of the land.
Yeah, right.
And they have to be expelled. And this is where the post-mills will say, oh, well, they have to be expelled. But how does Christ do the expulsion of the powers? Through the expansion of the gospel, not through these other means of political power or might or any of this kind of like worldly way. He instead says, I'm first going to go to the temple and correct my people, and then I'm not going to kick out the Romans. I'm going to let them kill me, and then I'm going to resurrect, and then I'm going to send you to also be killed as you tell of my resurrection. You cannot take the Joshua imagery from Joshua and think that we're supposed to go conquer in a political way after Christ has shown the conquering happens through the spread of the gospel. And this is where we get it upside down.
How do you kill Canaanites? One by one, right? Like, but this goes to a point that he tries to make. So I'm trying to steel man his position, because it goes into what you just said, David, really well. He goes to John 12:31, and John 12:31 says this: "Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out." Christ is talking about he's about to like go and be crucified or whatever, and he emphasizes like the word is now, which is again, you can't do that. But anyway, he says now is the time for judgment of this world. It's like the whole world was judged. Obviously, we all understand that's like in a proleptic way, an already not yet way, not final way. But he's almost confusing it as though this is the final way, and therefore the ruler of this world, which by the way Jesus calls him the ruler of this world. But now he's cast out, meaning, in a final way. And then he goes to Matthew. So here we go with the eisegesis or whatever. But he goes to Matthew 12 and talking about Christ casting out demons. And then he's accused of, casting out Satan by the power of Satan and all that sort of thing. And this is what I wrote down as a summary of his argument. The kingdom of God is here, and a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So the binding of the strong man is casting out Satan out of the world by limiting his power in the world. Whereas if you look at the passage in the context, how does Jesus cast out Satan in that context? It's by going to the individual and casting out a demon from the individual. So the victory of Christ, because you have this whole passage in Isaiah quoted about Christ's victory over the world and all that sort of thing, and over the nations even and whatnot. And it's the binding of Satan he's talking about is casting out has to do with Christ gaining victory over him through a reclaiming of the individual, not over like a massive thing or whatever. And then he moves over to the Great Commission, and he's like, well, see, this clearly is not talking about individuals, it's talking about discipling nations, which we've commented before. The grammar, when it says that you're to go to all the quote unquote nations, baptizing them, people think the them refers to nations, when in reality the nations is feminine. The them, the autos, is masculine plural. So it's talking about individuals, baptizing individuals within the nations and within the group. And I would say we shouldn't even translating that nations is horrible. The entire time in Matthew, it's not translated as nations. It's translated as Gentiles.
Right.
Go to all the Gentiles, baptizing them. That makes way more sense with the grammar and the context of how Jesus converts the world and gains victory of the world. One by one. Individuals. Now, there might be post-mills who believe that. That's great. I'm glad they do. I would agree with you. That's how Christ takes over the world. But I do think there's still the problem of the already not yet and thinking that he's going to take over the entire world now in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the sense in which, yes, it's individual, but we also see it happening at families. Again, to kind of steelman his argument a little bit.
Households.
We do see households saved.
Yeah.
And that could expand in a more corporate way. I mean, we obviously talk about federal headship a lot. However, our concept of nation as a corporate entity, especially in a democracy, without a federal head, becomes kind of strange to try to apply. It's like, you're taking it too far and your perspective is wrong. Like,
I would even argue, like, look, it's the Great Commission makes it possible that you would convert the entire world. However, it doesn't guarantee it, and that's the problem. Their reading is, though, this absolutely guarantees and says that God's going to convert the world. It's like, no, it doesn't. It says he's going to convert individual Gentiles, and that's what their job is to do. Maybe he decides to convert an entire nation. He's done that before, kind of, in a Christendom kind of sense. But the point is that you have no guarantee of it. There's nothing that says he will do it. It just says that, go in, convert these Gentiles, not even convert, disciple these Gentiles, baptizing them, teaching them all that I commanded you. And there's no guarantee of, nations will be converted. This is being joined to Old Testament texts that are promising Israel that they'll rule over the nations if they obey the Deuteronomic covenant, which is the old covenant. They don't do that. So it never happens. So now it's a question of, well, what did that symbolize? Was it a literal symbol that referred to the church taking over nations in the future? Or was it a symbol of the new heavens and new earth, which I think clearly it is in the Old Testament. So Christ will rule over the nations in the new heavens and new earth, and all the nations will be converted in the new heavens and new earth, because he will, even in Revelation, right? It's every tribe and tongue and nation and all that are worshiping him. But there's nothing that guarantees in the Bible that it will be everyone before then. It could be, but there's nothing in the Bible that says it will be.
So it's interesting, John 12, right? He reads verse 31, but there's also verse 32, right?
No,
so
Drake, come on, man. Don't read that.
Nun Christus estin tu cosmu tautu. So now judgment is of this world. And then nun ho archon tu cosmu tautu. Now, John usually uses cosmu as like the satanic world, the systems of the world typically. And then verse 32, kago eon. So, and I, if upsoto, if I am lifted up, ek tes geis. If I'm lifted up of the world, pantas ekluso, all I will drag. Pros emauton, towards me. So there's even this difference between like how he is ek ble tesetai, going to throw out Satan from the cosmos, meaning that Satan can no longer hold on to who he wants to hold on. Like he can no hold on anyone captive for the end, right? For judgment and accuse everyone. He's thrown him out. Now when he's lifted up, Christ now then has the authority in the taste gaze, the world, everything known, unknown, and he will drag them to himself because Satan doesn't have that authority anymore.
Right. When the disciples go out and preach the gospel, Christ says, I saw Satan falling from heaven. Before he's crucified, before AD 70,
right.
He sees Satan falling from heaven. In the preaching of the gospel, in the reclaiming of individuals, Satan is losing his kingdom. In that way, it's an already not yet of what's going to happen in the end. Satan is losing his kingdom slowly as Christ gets individuals to fill up the new heavens and new earth with. And so he's claiming victory over these individuals, again, one at a time. Or, we can say households. But my point is that it's not, oh, well, I'm trying to take over the world. He doesn't. If Christ wanted to take over the world, he could have done that originally, automatically, just immediately. That's not the point. The point is he needs to take over us from the inside out, and he does that one by one. And so, again, it's this idea that, look, if Satan falling from heaven and being cast out, because, again, Christ says this before he's even crucified, if that even happens at the crucifixion, the final thing happens there, then Paul making statements that Satan is the ruler of this world and he's now at work. He's the energeia behind all the disobedient in the world. That's now, by the way, the word now, now at work in the sons of disobedience.
Yeah.
He's speaking a few decades after Christ has been crucified. After Christ said this. So which is it? Obviously, it's not a final thing that's occurring. It's talking about a gaining of power over the devil, where he's being cast out. He's cast out of the heavenly place in terms of he doesn't have his rightful spot, because Christ does have the deeds to the world. All authority is given to him in that regard, but he's not claimed all the world yet. And so the devil's still going around with his power. I've made this analogy before between David and Saul. Saul still is the king of Israel, but David is really the anointed king by God. Right. But Saul's still ruling, and he's even persecuting David and the followers of David. And he kills the priests of David and all of that sort of thing. So you have this imagery in the Old Testament that tells you, look, you can have one ruler who is the Davidic king, literally the image of Christ in the Old Testament, who has the power over the land, but another ruler actually who's been ruling the land remains to rule the land until he dies. And then David takes over. Not when David's anointed. David's anointing happens way before he actually claims the land. Same thing in the New Testament. And that's what's being misunderstood and misapplied.
The big thing, too, because, I've went over the Theopolis Institute's, one of their articles on post-millennialism. And one of the issues is the misunderstanding contextually of like what Matthew's doing versus like John, for example. John is using Cosmo and taste gaze. So there's this holistic idea that there's nothing outside of Christ's reach, where Matthew is very interested in saying, if that's true, then the Gentiles are part of this thing. And you Jews need to incorporate these Gentiles because apparently in the Great Commission, Christ used language that would be offensive to hear from a Jewish Messiah to go into these hostile lands and then set up temples there. Don't tell them to come back to Jerusalem. You set up temples in these places where, right, Yahweh wasn't before. This temple wasn't before, quote unquote. So like that whole context is missed as well. So it's got to be, it's got to be these nationalistic, anachronistic definition of nationalistic term on these, nation states or whatever they are, that they have to become Christianized, and therefore that's the bring it back to David's point. That's Christians removing the Canaanites from the land. So that's the political power that they will use as Christian nations to do that.
This is one of the problems with evangelical interpretation, right? They take all the gospels because of the way they read them and just blend them all together. So they don't get the individual. So he does this even with like the word in Revelation, the word deo, which means to bind. Mm-hmm. The devil's bound. And then in Matthew 12, the strong man binds So look, deo is used, and I'm like, I mean, Paul uses deo in 1 Corinthians 7 talking about marriage. I mean, it's sort of like you can't do that. You can't do, but what he's trying to do is, because the same words are used, that's what Christ is doing in Matthew 12. He's putting the devil in the abyss. He's chaining him up and put him in the abyss so the devil can't. And this is the weirdest thing, that this is my issue with Amils as well when they do this, because Amils do not interpret Revelation well at all. If the abyss in Revelation represents the netherworld, that's why God he's bound the angels, the Enochian angels or whatever in the abyss, in the netherworld. He has to uncover it and let them out so they can actually do something in the world and do harm. And until he lets them out, they can't do anything because they're in the netherworld. They're not in this world. And so in Revelation, the devil is bound by this huge chain. So for there, I could see like, okay, maybe that's a symbol of a restriction. But then once he binds them up and chains them, he takes them and he throws them into the abyss and seals it over. And it's like, okay, that's talking about the devil being out of this world. He's no longer doing anything at all. It's not a restriction. It's complete and utter exile and removal of the devil. That clearly does not happen when Jesus is binding or Jesus dies on the cross, because Paul literally says he's still ruling the world. Revelation itself says he's the one giving the authority to the emperor, which I would argue the book makes very clear is Domitian, not someone before AD 70. But he gives power to the emperor. He's the power behind the Roman emperor. How would he do that if he didn't rule the world? If it was Jesus ruling the world, is Jesus giving it? Jesus is the dragon now, giving the authority to the emperor. It doesn't work out. This is where you have a system that people are shoving texts into, trying to make them fit. It's like that thing you have when you're 3 that has blocks or whatever, and you have to try to shove it through different shapes or whatever. And it's the kid trying to shove like the square block through like the round one, and he ends up like trying to break the thing. It's like, this is what this is. It's ignoring versus it doesn't work out. The system, therefore, is wrong. You can't get it from an exegetical position from the Bible. You have to try to shove it in and then ignore all this other stuff.
Have you well, I'm sure all of us have seen mafia movies where like they capture the leader, the head, mob boss, and they throw him in jail. And they're like, yeah, we got him. Everything's gonna stop now.
Right.
And then everything keeps actually the mafia gets stronger. And you're like, what's going on? And then you realize like he's still ruling down, but maybe not as much. He's definitely somewhere else. And he's maybe not as effective as he would be if he was free, but still going.
Well, I think that's the issue of the reason why it's described as he's being chained up first. So he can't do anything. He's completely chained up, and then he's thrown into this abyss. But I think you're right. I think people who might argue that might be like, oh, well, he's removed, but maybe he's sending messages to the world or whatever. But the whole point in Revelation is that there's no other power ruling the world. That's really the point. So there aren't other powers either. The idea that Satan is bound means all demonic powers are bound. They're all bound. That's the point of it. He represents his entire, federally, he represents his entire group, which are the demonic powers. And the point of that in Revelation is to show that it's not these demonic powers that are making people do evil. People are evil. They just give people opportunity for evil. Which is why when he unleashes the devil at the end of the 1,000 years, while Christ is ruling and everything, you have basically a utopia under Christ, people attack the camp. They attack Christ because they're wicked. Now, they didn't have an opportunity to kill Christ before, but now they want to because the powers give them that opportunity. That's the point. The point, therefore, is there are no demonic powers in play at the time of this scenario that John's bringing out. Christ alone is ruling the world, but he's ruling it over wicked men. Again, showing that he can't just let these wicked men into new heavens, new earth, because they're not becoming good just by Christ ruling over it. Just by Christ making the world good doesn't do anything to them. They have to be made good, and they're not. So they of course, they attack, then they're destroyed, and they're thrown into the lake of fire.
Well, there's also an interesting narrative disconnect for the postmillennial position that often wants to think about, like, we're going to battle for Christ and we're going to expand across the world. I'm like, well, if Satan isn't at least a ruler in the world, then who are you fighting?
Right.
Are you
Yeah.
are you just fighting wicked men and there are no demonic forces at all?
I really think that's what it becomes.
Like, in that case, how much time are you spending fighting yourself? Because you're still wicked.
Or even look at the way it manifests itself during the COVID years, right? You end up rebelling against the government.
Yeah.
So it's like that you've misunderstood if you're rebelling against the government. That's you literally have the New Testament telling you, even if the government abuses you, it has authority. You are to fear and honor it. You are not to disobey the government. Obviously, if it's telling you to do what's sinful, you can't. But that's the only thing. Other than that, you must obey the government. Why? Because Paul says in Ephesians 6, your struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the spiritual force. In fact, I wanted to read it. Read this, because again, this is after Christ says this stuff about Satan falling from heaven, right? So first he says in Ephesians 2, and although you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you formerly lived according to this world's present path, according to the ruler of the kingdom in the invisible realm, the ruler of the spirit that is now energizing at work in the sons of disobedience. So again, all this now language of how he's ruling. And then in 6:12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers. Notice how he emphasizes the fact that they're the ones in power. They're the ones in authority. The rulers, against the authorities, against the world powers of darkness, against the spiritual, and it's not even, he doesn't even, there's no noun here. It's just the substantival adjective. So it's the spiritual of evil, meaning spiritual beings or spiritual ones or whatever of evil in the heavenly realm, in the invisible realm. So that's who you're fighting against. 2 Corinthians 4:4, the God of this age/world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving. It seems like after the cross, they're still in positions of power, and they're still the problem of Christians. Otherwise, all these passages that tell Christians this is where your struggle is have no relevance to Christians today, because they're not in these positions of power. Because, and this is the point I want to make, in order for them to be a threat to Christians, they have to be in these positions of power. Otherwise, they're not a threat. That's why they take these positions. Otherwise, they're not a threat. This in Colossians, Paul says, look, God has crucified the law so that the spiritual forces actually don't have authority anymore over you. Because they have positions of power, they can punish you according to the law. But if you're not under the law anymore, they can't. It doesn't take away their power over the world. They can still punish the world, but they're not supposed to do it to you. And so the idea is that they only are a threat if they're in power. That's why the devil roams around like a lion, right? A lion's in power over that domain, over that area. He's guarding his environment. To deny this is deny the struggle that Christians have, and it leaves it to just basically be, well, I'm really just struggling against my own sin nature now because there's nothing else set against me. There's no plan that's at work against me at all.
Well,
Two things.
Sin nature, and then I'll let you go. Sin nature and just other people.
Right,
So
and
is it
other
any
people,
wonder
right.
that it becomes
People are the enemies.
essentially like a violent response, even though
Right.
our response is supposed to be to share the gospel.
Yeah.
We start to think that people are the enemy. Now,
Right.
sometimes people can become an enemy. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to flatten
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
But the idea of removing the spiritual powers then means that the only source of sin remaining in the world is mankind. So mankind must be the problem.
Well,
Congrats,
and therefore,
you're in a secular world.
mankind in power is where they're actually going to enact their evil. So now I need to be involved in trying to either get involved in government or take over government or something of that nature. And yeah, eventually it becomes a violent thing, because how do you do that? You can try to do that through words, but eventually it becomes violent.
Yeah.
And so, it puts you on a completely different course than the early Christians who were like, yeah, government's going to kill us. That's okay. We're going to give our lives because our lives are not bound here. They're with Christ, and He's going to put us in the world to come. So I don't need to overthrow government because they're doing this wicked thing, which is far more to Christians they did in the early centuries than what happened during COVID to Christians.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Drake.
There's a statement in First Peter. I think it's First Peter 4. I'm trying to find it, but when he says, you live long enough in your debauchery, like don't like come out of it, and don't go with those who are essentially tempting you to go with them to like the drunkenness and orgy parties.
Yeah.
And the question I was going to ask is like, where do you think those people are going to do that stuff? What are they doing? Like, do you think people think like it's a college fraternity and they just meet in these houses and they do this stuff? Like this is demon worship. This is like temple worship. They're going to their temples and doing this stuff. They're like, come and worship the gods with us. Come and worship the demons with us. You're like, no, I don't. I worship Yahweh. And they're like, well, what's wrong with you? Don't you want all the things the gods will give you, all this pleasure? And then they don't understand you, and then they mock you, and then he tells them not to do that. So my question is like, okay, are there demons behind that? I mean, you'd have to, I guess maybe you'd have to say yes at this point because 7 AD hasn't happened yet. So Satan isn't bound yet. Like
that's why you have to get everything before 70 AD. Make 70 AD about the actual like kingdom that's coming and actually like where the millennium begins or whatever, which I don't know really how that works in post-mill, because the millennium is the utopian part of it, not the whole thing.
Right.
So it's kind of a weird, he has kind of a blended idea that the millennium starts at 80, 70 or whatever. Now the problem for me is that you can't get all the books before 80, 70. Some of them are, some of them are not. And Revelation itself indicates that it's Domitian that John's talking about, and almost all scholars will recognize that except for preterists.
Yeah, I do think that's the thread that always unravels the whole thing. Like it's kind of like a trophy to go after that, but it is
he
the big
counts
one.
through the emperors in 17.
Well,
like he literally tells you, and he tells you that the beast that he's talking about isn't Nero, because he originally it's Nero. That's true, but then he says the beast is dead. The beast is not. So at the time of the sixth king that John says he's writing at or whatever, which is apocalyptic in nature, because he's probably writing during the time of Domitian, but he's going back in time to project forward. But the sixth king is not the beast. It was the fifth king, who's Nero, and then he says it's going to remanifest itself in the eighth king. And then you count, okay, Nero, Vespasian, and then he says the seventh king only reigns for a while. Titus only reigns for 2 years. It's the shortest of any emperor in the first century. And then the eighth king, Domitian. And that makes sense. That's the only persecution in the first century you have of Christians. So not only, like, again, it's not informed by good scholarship. It's informed by like this preterist, again, academic work and preterism, but it's not exegetical. It's not drawing from the text or whatever. And because of that, you can then be like, oh, well, everything's before 8070. So that makes then every statement about Satan ruling irrelevant, because that's just before everything was written before 8070. And once 8070 happened, the devil's not ruling anymore, or he's severely restricted. And that's what and that's what the throwing in the abyss is. And that goes to my other point of people have noticed that Revelation is not chronological. If you read Revelation 1 to the end, it's not a chronology. You're not going from the beginning to the end. However, every cycle is chronological within the cycle. So although you're not going from beginning to end of the Revelation and going in a chronological sequence, once you get into a cycle, it is chronological. And the last cycle of the book is the biggest one. I would argue, scholars break it up differently, but I would argue it goes from 12 to 22. That's the last cycle. And it's very clear in 12, the devil's ruling all the way through the cycle until you get to the millennium, so that the resurrection of the dead is not talking about the regeneration of saints. It's not happening at the crucifixion of Christ, because that's already happened once the devil's ruling and giving power to the beast. That Christ has already died at that point, at the very beginning. So you get to the end. It's at the end of the cycle that this occurs. So you can't make the throwing of the devil into the abyss the beginning of the cycle. It's the end of it. It's after this whole thing has happened. It's after the judgment of the world's occurring, and Christ has actually returned and raised people from the dead. That all happens at the time that he bounds the devil. So obviously it has not occurred in that way yet, if that scenario, as John plays out, is going to happen. Again, I argue that John's giving you multiple scenarios because he doesn't know how the end will play out. That's not been revealed to him. It's been revealed that Christ is going to gain victory, but not how. So he just has multiple scenarios. In none of them is the devil thwarted before the end. In none of them. The devil rules and the world is wicked and all the powers of darkness are unleashed on the world until the end. None of them become like there's no good little part in between or something. It's you get to the end, and then on the last cycle, you might have a millennial kingdom before the end, but you're still at the end at that point, and then you have new heavens and new earth. That's the way every cycle plays out. So we are then told that every cycle plays out with the devil ruling until that point, until the end of the world.
Yeah, on that. So going back to First Peter and that, just that one reference out of the whole epistle. The whole epistle is the argument that pagans are in authority over Christians, who are supposed to be a holy nation called out by Yahweh, like the most power, only one that's risen from the dead, and we're supposed to submit to these guys. And Peter's like, yeah.
Who does Revelation say they got their power from?
Right. Yes. Right. So if you want to go ahead and say, well, that kind of authority is bound, again, my question is, why are you neutering Peter? Why are you cutting off the very essence of what sustains Christians in a world that is trying to devour them, where you have someone like a lion actually roaming around? And he uses the lion language on purpose because lion communicates authority and judgment.
Well,
and that's still Satan still has some type of illusionary authority on this earth in that way.
Yeah, the lion literally is the viewed as like right. That's why Christ is called the Lion of Judah. By the way, the ruler, the king of Judah.
So there's also something interesting in this, because thinking back to my military background, and obviously Drake, you have a military background as well, but like, a lion is also an ambush predator. It is not the lion that just, strolls across and attacks you. It hides and then attacks you. Yep. It catches somebody who's in the wrong place at the wrong time. It finds someone distracted. Like, that's what lions do, and that's how you win a war. You distract people. So how do you get a whole bunch of professed Christians to stop fighting on the battlefield? Make them believe that you're not even there anymore. There is no power of darkness anymore. The only thing left is just to expand forever, and maybe there are wicked men, but there's no real power behind them. I can't fight a war if I don't recognize that there is really an enemy.
That's one of my favorite things in Lord of the Rings, and Fellowship of the Ring, when the hobbits are trying to figure out, is Aragorn a good guy or not? And I think Pippin, I can't remember in the book who says it. In the movie, I think it's Samwise. But he's like, I would have thought that if he were evil, he would seem fairer, right? Mm-hmm. He would seem fairer.
Yeah. I remember that statement.
Yeah. And I'm like, there it is right there. And even Paul in 2 Corinthians does say he comes as an angel of light. Mm-hmm. So like this whole post-mill idea, I'm like, okay. Like what a way to neutralize.
Well, even it makes you feel like you're fighting when you have nothing you're fighting. You are really just Paul, the man beating the air at that point. Because if there is no enemy who is ruling, what are you fighting against? It doesn't make any sense.
This is actually what energeia means. Besides, all the ortho bros are like, oh, it's the energies of God. It's like, no, literally Paul's using to talk about, it's the energeia at work in the sons of disobedience. It's talking about the inward workings that you don't see are at work behind the scenes doing these things. Like when I don't think we released the podcast that I did on the Enlightenment, right? So I did this thing at talking about enlightenment religion or whatever, and it's very clear that it's a conspiracy, but not of men. I don't think men put together any sort of conspiracy. No one met in a room like, hey, let's you put evolution and undermine the Bible that way. We'll undermine it with higher critical theories and Babylonianism and we'll do all this. It's like no one did that, but you can see the devil coordinating and totally setting this all up and getting people to shift from belief in revelation to belief in self and intuition and all that sort of thing, and empiricism and all that sort of thing over everything else. And it's like, yeah, it totally looks like a plan. Like it totally looks like a plan, but no humans put it together. They're just pieces on a chessboard. And if you don't understand that, Paul makes the statement, look, the world's deceived, but we're not ignorant of the devil's schemes, his plans. Because we know that he's working. There is a conspiracy. He's working against us. He's moving against us. Paul talks about like I think was he trying to go to Spain?
Yeah.
He says, the devil thwarted me. I couldn't go.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean that he couldn't go? Jesus owns the world. It's like, how's the devil thwarting Paul? That's impossible. Unless he's the ruler of the world and he doesn't let Paul go into a particular domain. So again, he's not restricted in that way.
Well, he also says, we just went over this in 2 Corinthians, that actually it's a tool of Satan to divide churches, like what's going on in Corinth, using men to detach churches from apostles.
Yeah.
It's like, is that not happening anymore? Is that? I guess that's not. We don't need to worry about that strategy from the enemy anymore.
Well, I think what this all means, and I think this is an important point, is that if you interpret what happens in Revelation correctly and you interpret these things as they are on face value and you don't do the 80-70 thing and all that garbage, Satan's not been restricted in any way. In any way. The thing that restricts the devil, so restrict in terms of his power or whatever, is going back to Matthew 12 and realizing the strong man that binds him is Christ, who's stronger, can bind the devil and kick him out of an individual and reclaim the individual that way. That's what Christ is trying to say in that passage. He's saying, look, and I think it has a double meaning to it. I think when he conveys that, people are like, oh, who's the strong man? Who's the weaker man in the house or whatever? I think he's talking about, look, you are the weaker man in the house. The strong man is the devil that comes and binds you. However, I'm the strong man who comes and binds that man as the weaker man in the house. So I actually have the power to reclaim individuals. That's the all authority given to me. I can actually go throughout this empire now because it's all mine, and I can go anywhere in this empire and I can claim individuals for my world to come because I can bind the strong man. I can bind the devil. No one else can do that. And the devil in general isn't bound by anything. He can kill you according to Revelation. He has the authority to kill you if he wants because it's his domain. He can execute you anytime he wants. That's the point. Now, obviously, Christ is the emperor, so he can restrict him in some, obviously, in the ways to fulfill Christ's plan. But in terms of his domain and what he's able to do and his power, he's not restricted at all. There's nothing in the Bible that says he is, unless you misinterpret that passage in Revelation 19.
I want to make one last appeal, and I know we've listened to like one part of this guy's.
Yeah, I know.
I hope we've steel manned them and stuff.
The problem is I'd have to try to find everything, and I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
But he brings up the Great Commission, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say like I'm a scholar, an exegetical scholar in this aspect where I like know all the data and I can actually articulate all of the data together and make it like a complete summary explanation. But from the grammatical study that I have done, there's one big, and Brown, we were talking about this last night, but like when Christ actually responds to them in verse 18, he says, legon edote, legon, there's a participle saying, I have been given, right? The dote, the aorist, passive aorist form of being given, the didomi, right? There's in the aorist, everyone just says, well, it's past tense, so he's been given authority. What people don't look at though is like the aspect, it being like perfective, meaning there is actually something that happened in the past that began and ended, and there's a result that either is going to continue forever or continue until some kind of requirement is met. And specifically, he says he'd be given to me, pasa all exousia and oranoi in heaven, in the heavens, kai epi tes case, and on the earth, right?
Hmm.
And I want to say, is that the way? Is that the authority that Christ will always have forever, or is this in the grammar indicating something that Christ has now, but he won't rule in this way at another point in the future? It seems to suggest, because Christ gives the heavenly kingdom back to the Father, that this commission is not an everlasting commission. This commission comes to an end at some point. So like what I want, like, meaning, because the argument is that Christ has been given all authority and that's just what he's
Right.
received.
Can I back
wanna
up
say
that
he's been
point?
given a specific authority.
Well, yeah, let me back up that point by what he actually says in the passage, right? And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So he's not going to be with them after that?
Right.
Obviously, he's talking about, I've been given all authority in heaven and earth, so do this job, and that authority I've been given allows me to be with you until the end of the age. Once the end of the age comes, I'm not going to be with you in that sense. I'm actually literally going to, he doesn't say this, obviously, but through other passages, I'm literally going to be coming back and with you. But in the sense that I'm with you as the emperor of the universe, I'm going to sit on my Father's throne because he's the emperor of the universe. I'm going to be the king of kings, the emperor, and I'm going to be with you to the end of the age. Then I'm going to come back and be the king of the world. Then I'll be the Lord. This is why you get the division of God the Father, God's God, and Jesus is Lord. Not because Jesus isn't God, but because God is going to be, he's going to take the position as the deity, ruling over everything, and Jesus is going to be the Lord, the mediatorial king over the world. That has not happened yet. So clearly, him sitting on his Father's throne is not sitting on a permanent throne. That's a throne that literally Revelation 15 says he's going to give back to the Father. Literally says he gives the kingdom to the Father. He gives the kingdom back to the Father. What does that mean? Why is he giving it back? It's because it's a kingdom he's not ruling over. He's not ruling over the universe. He's going to actually take a position as the mediatorial king on the earth, in the physical realm. And the Father will rule the rest, everything together as the emperor or whatever. And so you have the inversion of what you have in Revelation, which is the devil ruling the world and giving that power to, the Roman emperor. Instead, Christ is going to rule as the king of Judah, and all the nations are going to submit to Judah, just like the promise in the Old Testament, but it's going to be new heavens and new earth. That's the idea.
Yeah. And I think that interpretation of the Great Commission fully parallels John 12 that we read, where he says, what is this ekbale? What is this casting out, ekbalse, I guess, in the future? What is this casting out going to look like? Well, it looks like salvific power, because Christ then says, what does the salvation looks like? It's going, discipling, baptizing. Like, this is all salvific language. This is all the power he has now in heavens and earth to do, because he's ruling cosmically. Like, this is complete salvific power.
Yeah, I'll draw all men to myself. That's what he's talking about.
That's the drawing, right?
And is that all men in the world, or is that John's all men, meaning like everyone who's been elected out of the nations will be drawn to Christ?
Yeah. Yeah. And then just as a side note, there's a reason Matthew uses tes geis and then later uses ethne. Pasas ta. Oh no, that's where is it? Panta ta ethne. So world. Oh yeah. By the way, that means Gentiles.
Yeah.
World Gentiles. Anyway.
One of the other as you were speaking that just kind of came to mind is, how do you deal with the temptation of Christ in the wilderness when Satan says, I will give you all of these nations? Like, was he just lying? Like, he didn't, that wouldn't be a temptation if he didn't have some sort of authority at the time.
Well, see, they're going to argue that, well, that's before Jesus dies and before AD 70.
But then the actual ethical problem that we create is that same temptation, the temptations that came to Christ, are temptations we face.
Right.
And if he is gone, then we no longer know how to face those temptations.
Yeah.
Hebrews is a liar then.
We are
Right.
without any sort of recourse to
Yeah.
these temptations, or they have to claim, oh, you're just not being tempted in that way. You'll never
Well,
be
yeah.
tempted to take a position of power in the world because you're prideful or whatever else. You'll never be tempted to that because there's no power to tempt you to that.
Yeah, I gave a sermon on Luke 4 that where I was like, look, Christ's temptation is our temptation. It's literally the temptation of Adam again with Christ, and it's each one of our temptation. I don't think people probably realized that is like an anti-post-mill argument. It's literally it is literally saying we're in the same world that Christ was in, with the same ruler of this world that Christ was under, being tempted by the same ruler for the same things. And that is, the Bible consistently presents it that way. You never have anything else presented as though like, well, yeah, no, now it's different.
But like, again, ethically, it just means that how are you supposed to have the conversation with somebody in your church or with a brother, with a family member, whatever, that they might be tempted to take a position of power, knowing that they're not right for it, or that they might be tempted to avoid the position of power, which is the other direction that Adam goes, where he goes passive instead of taking the command that he should have early in the garden, right? Like, how do you know how to even deal with these twin traps if I just assume the traps don't exist?
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
biased or anything, but I think this is the best takedown of this eschatology I've ever heard tonight. Only because I think, like, instead of like dealing with it doctrinally, like we've hashed out like the pragmatic, like how does this affect your Christian life? Like, if you think about it, it just makes your Christian life illogical without who are you fighting, and like what are we actually being sanctified from and to, and you know, it makes the Christian life make sense when you when you read it the right way.
And in this guy's defense, right, like, he has an ethical concern. He mentions that it affects the way that we live in the world, and our Christianity should. But to the earlier thing that you said, Brian, I think he probably had a kind of Gnostic view before. So
Yeah.
he wasn't applying the spiritual realities of salvation into the world in the way he already should have been,
Right.
separate from a post-millennial view. Because I don't need a post-millennial view to ask the ethical questions about how I should treat my brother or sister in Christ.
Right.
In fact, I think we've shown that it might break the way that we can think about interacting with brothers and sisters.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if the problem now is just basically the humans, then even the humans in the church who don't share this understanding that we need to be at war with other humans need to be broken from as well. So now it creates schism, which we've seen over and over again within the church. But I also want to say something to the pragmatic statement that Drake said. My main problem isn't even the pragmatic thing. It's the academic. Like, notice, I love James White, but up until a couple years ago when he changed his mind, he was talking about how he never studied eschatology because he didn't like it. It was a subject he didn't care for. And it's like, yeah, I'm not surprised that you became a post-mill then, because you didn't really study it. I've studied eschatology a long time. And not just eschatology. I studied how to exegete scripture. And reading these preterists, like Ken Gentry, he references, you know, fine Christian, I'm sure. Again, another example of people doing academic work who are not good exegetes. Like, I have read so much of Gentry from different positions that he's taken, especially in the preterist realm, and I'm just like, no, you just inserted that, you ignored this, you didn't. You're trying to. He tries to make the beast like general emperors, like it's Nero, but then it's general emperors in 17, and that way you can kind of try to get away from it being like Domitian, later. And it's like, it's not general emperors because literally it's talking about one dying and not being alive anymore, and then one coming about. Like, it's individual kings. It's clear, and then John even says these are individual kings. So it's just exegetically it fails completely. And then it also might have bad pragmatic effects because, I think, as you guys were pointing out, it makes you at war with other people then. rather than understanding we're not at war with other people. They're the victims of this. They may become vessels, but we're living in the matrix. The problem are the machines, not the people.
Yeah.
It may be that people become a problem, but it's primarily the machines. It's primarily the program. It's all that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how like something as simple as like Acton's art and your understanding of aspects can like really make the Great Commission confusing. Because if you think having been given is just aspectually you being a participant in the crowd where you're seeing everything play out at once, is like is that how time works? Is that temporally what's going on and Christ is communicating, or it seems to be something else going on? And everything's hung on these verbs, and they try to morph these verbs into things that they want that help their worldview make sense.
Yeah.
But it goes to show like you need to actually like study these things to be able to speak to what this guy's trying to conclude or teach.
Well, let me give a challenge to people real quick on that passage specifically when it comes to the translation of nations. Read through the Gospel of Matthew, maybe a couple times even, and tell me whether Christ is concerned with national entities or Gentiles. Because Matthew is very much about Jewish-Gentile conflict going on in the church, not nation states or anything like that. That's not the concern. So that tells you how you should actually translate it at the end. It shouldn't be go to the nations. It should be go to the Gentiles and teaching them all that I taught you.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a video on that.
We started with translation, and one of the things that I actually will kind of note here that is huge that Alter does in the Old Testament that I think has practical implications for the New Testament as well is trying to avoid the use of synonymity. So just because a word is synonymous in English doesn't mean I should just swap it for another word.
Yeah.
And if Matthew consistently uses ethnoi or ethne to mean Gentiles, but I translate it as nation in one spot differently because
Right.
I'm like, oh, it's synonymous. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not necessarily synonymous. And there's a whole bunch of ways that I can break connections across biblical passages as well. But within a book, how does that writer use that term consistently?
Yeah.
And don't use synonymity because we like variation in English. You confuse people.
Well, literally in Matthew, when people are being excommunicated, right, it's that let them be as a tax gatherer or a Gentile to you. Now, if you translated that as nation, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm have nothing to do with any nation. I'm a sovereign citizen. I'm a that sort of thing. It's like it's like no, it means Gentile. There means like a pagan individual, someone who's outside. They're not in the group of God type thing. That's what it means. And so if you consistently translate and understand, oh, it's Gentiles, pagans, they're being converted along with the Jews. And so the goal is not just, hey, Israel, the goal is to go into the world and find other believers among the pagans. Has zero to do with you taking over nation states. Again, that could be in God's plan, but that's not guaranteed or said here. That's not what it's talking about.
Yeah, grammaticalization is a hard concept to understand, and when you start to realize that words, the meaning of words depend on what's around them. When you realize that, you can start being consistent in how you translate things, so you're not just using synonyms that are confusing for everyone else, where you might say nation here and then like nation state somewhere else or Gentile somewhere else. Yeah. But I use the example all the time. Like if I just put word groups together, there are groups of words that make sense in our world, and then there are words that don't make sense. So if I say like, I coughed, everyone understands what I would mean. Or the engine coughed, everyone understands what that means. But if I said I coughed the engine, you'd be like, what? Because grammatically, that just doesn't make any sense in our world. And when you read passages like, I think it's Ponta Ethne, the words that are grouped together can only mean Gentile. it'd be like if you shove something else in there, it'd be like me saying I coughed the engine. Like it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people don't get that.
Well, the fact that you have the pronouns just write it out for you. I'm talking about the individual them, because in Greek
Yeah.
it's gonna be nations. Ethne is feminine. Greek is gonna have a feminine pronoun referring back to the feminine. Instead, because it's Gentiles referring to men, individual men, it's got a plural them, autus. So
Yeah.
that to me is like, I don't know how people get around that other by saying, well, sometimes grammar doesn't match up in scripture. It's like, okay, well, sometimes yes, but
Yeah.
it's clear in the
Theophilus-
context of the Gospel of Matthew. That's the point.
Yeah, Theophilus conceded that point. I was actually like, at least you concede that. And he's like, but look at Scotland. I was like, okay. Shakespeare baptized everybody. You're like, okay, all right.
Yeah, moving the goalpost.
Yeah,
Yeah, some of this is also just a problem of like deep diving translation theory made me realize just how little I know about translation theory. Right? There's when you've studied something for like a few weeks, or maybe you've just pulled up Step Bible and like looked at a Greek lexicon, and you're like, I know what this means now, and you're like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
you're on the top of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You
Right,
are
terrifying.
right.
at the
Yeah.
peak of Mount Stupid.
Yeah.
And I've been there.
Yeah.
But you need to come into the valley of despair and take a moment to really understand how much you know about the language
Yeah, keep asking
before you
questions.
make those claims.
and it's
Yeah.
still that way. Like maybe not for Brian, but maybe I can speak for
No,
you.
I,
and
I,
you might do.
I'm constantly asking questions. That's how I know anything. So
Yeah,
I'm constantly being like, am I right about that? Let me recheck. Like I'm
Yeah.
always going back and looking at it again.
yeah. I told you this, Brian. I feel like I almost need to go get a linguistics degree just so I have like a basic understanding of like how language works. You know, it's
Well,
Ah.
look, it's the same thing with logic, right? Everyone needs a logic degree again, because I feel like, or at least take a cognitive thinking course or something, because we failed in it. And all linguistics is logic applied to language. That's all it is.
yeah.
Communication is just logic in process. So like, to me, this isn't, and I want people to be really clear. This isn't us going to scripture and being like, well, we have a different opinion and we can string together other verses in different ways. I'm actually saying this argument is illogical. The argument, that's what I mean by exegesis. Exegesis is identifying the logical communication God has used in scripture to refer to this and not that, to mean this and not that. And that's what I mean by exegesis. You're drawing out from the text the logical references that are given to you in the text so that you can identify properly what the author is trying to say. And when you ignore that and you take a verse here and you shove it along with this verse, or you say, well, this word's used here, so I'm going to use it the same way here, and you just kind of shove everything together, you are ignoring the reference of the context the author has provided. And you might as well just be interpreting Harry Potter right now and giving us that, because we're just going to get you, not the scripture at that point.
Yeah, and I mean it's the logic and the rhetoric of the time, right? The actual
Yeah.
style piece, right? Because if
Right.
I come at it just purely from logic without adding that layer of style, which you're not doing, but
Well, I would argue
Then-
the style is logic too. So
Yeah,
all
the
of it
style
is, it's all the world of what they understand, how they communicate. That's all a logical framework. That's what I don't mean like a cold mathematical logic, but I mean a logic in terms of the author knows that what he says refers to something logically, and his style and genre is presenting something that everyone's going to understand logically. It's all referential, is what I mean. It's referential.
yeah,
But referential is logical. So in that regard, if you don't understand those things, you're not going to understand the language, and you're not going to understand the author, and that means you don't understand anything the Bible's saying, unless it somehow through some alignment of the stars, your world overlaps with their world, and you happen to understand something because of that. But other than that, you're not going to get what's said. You're going to blend things together like this guy does, and misunderstanding what this means and that means. Look at how much people do with, well, Christ has all authority, therefore he's ruling right now. Rather than understanding that Christ has all authority, what does that mean? It's broken down in the New Testament as he rules everything that God rules, and in the same way Yahweh ruled it. Everything universally as the emperor, mediatorily as just the king of Israel. That's it. That's what he rules. He rules what the Father ruled. Instead, we hear he rules everything as the King of Kings, and we think, oh, then there's nothing, no. How does Kuiper say it? There's no foot of land or inch of land or whatever it is.
No inch, no.
Yeah,
no,
that Christ doesn't look at and say mine.
every square inch or something. Yeah.
And it's like, well, in a way, kind of, because he owns it proleptically in the sense that he has the deed to it. But in the way of claiming it, no. The New Testament says he hasn't claimed it. That's not true.
And the last little piece to this that I know you guys have mentioned in the past and I've talked with April about is there is a real sense in which creation is not done.
Yeah.
Like there's still creating to happen. So part of why Christ may not be right now returning is not because we need to like make some change, but because he's not done creating us.
Yeah.
To be who we ought to be when we enter his kingdom and to modify everything as he wants to modify it. Not because we need to come to some, we have to reach a certain finish line before he'll come back. Otherwise, he's just not going to accept it.
Right.
And this is where like the logic is similar. Like I almost sound post-millennial in this way, but it's not that I need to do it. It's that Christ has creating still to do.
Yeah.
And until creation is done, he's not claiming the final product.
Well, and the world, we're told in the New Testament, the world and its sufferings and pain is the catalyst. Like that's the means through which we are created. And so until he's done creating us, that world has to remain. And the primary element of that world that makes it so much suffering and everything is the devil being at the head of it. Like that's what makes it that way. And I think this all kind of draws back to the already not yet, where people misunderstand the already not yet. In John 5, Christ lays out the already not yet. This is important if you read anything from John, his entire theology is built on this. So if you don't get this, you don't get anything John's written, not his gospel, not his letters, not Revelation, nothing. Christ says a time is coming and now is, so presently is, when people will hear the voice of the Son of Man and come alive. And there you have, at first it's kind of ambiguous. Are you talking about physically, spiritually? But it's very clear he's talking about spiritually because of what he says next. So he's talking about regeneration there. That's a time is coming, so it's going to be in the future, and it's now. It's already here now. So it's going to happen now and basically ongoing from this time on. But then he says right after it, a time is coming, and he doesn't say and now is. He just says a time's coming. So in the future, they will hear the voice of the Son of Man, and they will come out of the tombs. They will come alive and come out of the tombs. That's clearly talking about physical resurrection. So that is not yet. The physical is the future. That's the time is coming, but is not now. The spiritual resurrection, the regeneration, that's the time is coming and now is. Everything is built on that. You are given all things spiritually, all blessings in Christ, all access to God right now. All spiritual things are yours. You partake of the divine nature, all of it now. I heard Jay Dyer talk about how, well, the reason why we can worship or we can venerate icons is because Protestants don't understand Jesus deified all nature. And I'm like, no, dude, no. Jesus has deified his body only. That's the only part. It's the first fruits that's been deified. When he comes back, he will deify all nature. That's why all nature is groaning for the resurrection of the body of the children of God. That's why Paul says, he who gave life to your spirit will, in the future, that whole future there, will give life to your mortal bodies, which means presently they're mortal bodies. This is why we die. This is why we suffer pain. This is why all creation is groaning, because it's not been deified. This is the mistake of post-mills as well. This is the mistake of people who are like, oh yeah, the devil's not ruling anymore, because they think, oh, because Christ ascended to heaven and he's the rule over all authority and powers, that means he's actually claimed everything and everything's changed now. No, just those that he has been united to and has regenerated. Those are the only ones who've been changed in the inner man. Nothing else has changed yet. We're not getting older. We're not living longer because of that. We're living longer because in the Enlightenment, it's very industrial, and they're inventions that allow us to live a little bit longer, a tad longer, by the way, not really like that much longer. And then you have other things in history that were killing them that aren't killing us right now.
We're nowhere close to Methuselah. I'm just saying.
Right. Because nothing has changed on that level. Nothing has been deified in that regard. It is not going to be until the resurrections of the sons of God that will happen on a day, all together, all at once, will occur. Until that time, the already is spiritual with no physical benefits. That needs to be very clear. Unless you're talking about just by nature the physical benefits that happen from spiritual things that move in the world, but not in the sense that we are energized by the power of God to make our flesh now incorruptible, or now we'll be healthier than we were before because Jesus ascended to heaven. No, that's not what's happening. To not understand that is to not understand what the New Testament's talking about, and to mess up the eschatological timeline of how things are going to occur.
You know, it's fast. Like, I'm just going to throw this out here, but the only probably, this is me thinking out loud, the only probably physical way in the already not yet, the not yet aspect is the Eucharist. If there's any like physical benefit of the kingdom actually like uplifting like physically the people of God, it is the Eucharist that does that.
Yeah.
And
well, in our fellowship, we can have physical, but the idea that we're transformed physically is the problem. This
Right.
is why actually this is one of my arguments against the Eucharist being transformed, because I'm like, well, unless I mean, I guess you could make like a unification argument that if the bread is somehow connected federally to Christ, you could probably say it's transformed. But other than that, you can't, because nothing physical has been transformed.
Right. It has to be the physical action of feeding another Christian who would maybe die if they weren't fed. And then,
there's moral transformation. That's obvious.
yeah.
Christ coming into the world, that changed the whole world morally.
yeah.
But we're talking about actual like spiritual energy, like the Holy Spirit actually transforming. No, that's in your spirit.
Well, and the irony of this is that this is the reformed version of the prosperity gospel.
Yes, 100%.
Right, it's
totally
Like
totally.
the same prosperity gospel that would be pushed on against from the Pentecostal side.
Same,
that
same
like, no,
passages quoted in the Old
it's
Testament.
the same health and wealth gospel.
Yeah.
It's just you've got your post-mills saying it versus your pre-mills saying it.
Yeah.
And your dispies, right? Like you've arrived at the same conclusions that, oh, if I don't have health or if I don't have wealth, then God must be mad at me. There must be something wrong. As opposed to like, no, like if you have those things, that's a blessing, wonderful, but don't put your trust in them because they're not the point. And Paul was happy with much and happy with little. That was the point. And that he wanted to actually take part in the sufferings of Christ. We can't go to either side because they apparently just come to the same place. The Reformed post-mill view is health and wealth, and so are the Pentecostals.
Well, this is, I actually think that the greatest judgment of a lot of Reformed people will be hypocrisy. I think this is their greatest sin, because I don't hear a single church, Reformed church, if I were to listen to all their sermons, not one would probably be absent of saying something negative about Joel Osteen. And yet they preach his theology in another form.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're just as destructive as he is, because you set people up to have expectations of God in this world that are not true, and they end up abandoning their faith or losing faith because of it. That is wicked. So it's not just, oh, we all have our different ideas. It's like, I agree, eschatology does matter, and yours is killing people. Stop it.
It's like blue collar versus white collar. Yeah, like the post was the white collar health and wealth.
But it's the same.
But it's the same, right? It's just It sounds smarter. Post mill sounds
Because-
smarter than Joe Osteen.
Because
That's about
no
it.
matter how much we want to say the devil is not around or he's not, pulling strings and whatever, he is, but
Yeah.
he's not that creative. He uses the same things in different guises
Well,
over
why-
centuries and centuries and centuries.
And why is that? Because
It
that's
works.
his reward. His reward is if you follow him, he'll give you good health. If you follow him, he'll give you riches. If you follow him, he'll give you the power of the nations. That's his reward. So that's what he promises in his fake Christianity.
Yeah.
Instead, we should be like, Christ's kingdom is not of this world. And I don't care how many times I've heard Post Mill try to explain that. I've never heard a good explanation. Again, within John's already not yet. Within John's already not yet, this kingdom is not, or his kingdom is not of this world. And it won't be until the physical takes place in the resurrection. That's the whole point.
All right, good discussion. This is lively. This is really good. And I don't obviously we don't want to disparage. I don't know. I can't remember his name or anything like that.
No, I would just encourage him to keep going. Don't think that
Yeah.
you found it. You didn't.
Right.
You found something better, because Gnosticism's horrible.
Yes.
So you did find something better, but it's still not what it should be.
And maybe this conversation will. I doubt he'll ever watch this, but maybe if he does, it'll take him in that direction. And before I end in something completely off topic, is there anything else you guys want to say?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, because Brian brought up Harry Potter, and I can actually geek out with two other nerds. I do have the Attic Greek translation.
Hey, you know what's funny? I don't know if you're gonna. Well, now that you brought it up, you know what's funny is that now I've never read the books. I don't know if it's the same in the books, but in the movie, everyone's denying that Voldemort has any power anymore in the world. That he actually has
Oh,
come
are
back
they?
or anything. Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone's denying that Voldemort has come back, and they're all like, and it's only the freaks that are kind of making trouble. They're actually saying that he, has actually come back. He actually has power. He's actually at work behind the scenes, and everybody's like, no, he isn't. You're just trying to get attention and all that sort of thing. But I do find it funny that is the fundamental way he then gets power, because he actually, no one's looking for him. Everybody thinks that he's not there. So he actually kind of takes over that way. So anyway, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting parallel there when you brought the book up.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Great discussion. If you want to comment, go ahead and do that. Our last video, which was like 3 weeks ago, got tons. So join the party. Let this video get a little bit more momentum. And if you really want to support us and see what we're doing, join our Patreon. And hopefully we'll be back. We're busy men and busy fathers and mothers, so we try to get as many videos as we can. But if it's not for a couple of weeks, we'll see you then. Eros sete humas. Peace.
Bye-bye.